Hey guys, welcome back once again to the final video in this series about drift fishing. If you're new, if you just found this, ran across it through a search or suggested video, my name is Denny. This is my channel, Float Fish Adventure. I'm here, it's here to try and inspire you to get out and have some adventures of your own, to give you some information to help make those adventures more successful, and to try and do this in an entertaining manner so you don't feel like you're having your time wasted while you're sitting around watching YouTube. So this video is the fourth video in a series of videos all about drift fishing, how to get out, how to do it successfully. We're talking specifically about catfishing. There is plenty of information here that will help you with drift fishing for other species, and I may do something later about that. But today's video is going to be the final video in the series. We've talked about, the overall strategy. We've talked about location, which is one of the keys to successful drift fishing. So we broke down the other major key, which is presentation, into two. And the last video was about depth control, and finally now we're going to talk about speed control. You have to be where the fish are. You have to get your bait down at the right level where the fish are, and then finally you've got to have that bait moving at the right speed. So that it gives a chance, an opportunity to find it, track it down, and also, you're trying to trigger a little bit of reaction with that bait. So that's what this final installment is going to be about, is just getting your bait moving at the right speed. Speed control is arguably one of the most difficult aspects to kayak fishing, especially if you're doing it if you're just paddling. So there are some tricks to it and some basic information that you want to have and always be keeping in mind while you're doing this. So that's going to be the topic of this final video. Let's go ahead and get to it. So when it comes to monitoring your speed, the single easiest way to do it is with GPS, right? So probably the best argument for having sonar that has GPS capability is just so you can monitor your speed when you're trying to drift. And if you do have that, well, then that's pretty straightforward. You just look at your sonar and make sure that you're staying within the speed that you're trying to get, half mile an hour to a mile an hour, while you're making your drift pass. If you don't have sonar that has GPS so it can track your speed, all hope is not lost. So one trick you can do, and this takes a bit to get set up right, a little bit of work, but worth it in the end when you're keeping your speed dialed in. So you can take a rod. So your phone, everybody's phone's gonna have GPS, right? So you can download an app that will show you your speed. Then take a rod that you're not going to fish with, or it can't even be a rod that you're fishing with, but it's going to be a rod that's suspended straight down. And what you want to do is, you want to drop that line down, and you're going to have to experiment with weight. So use your phone, use the app on your phone to track, to get where, let's say you want to go at a half mile an hour, and you want to know when you're over a mile an hour, because that's going to be too fast. So you set up the rod with the weight straight down, and you keep adding weight on it so that it stays down at a half a mile an hour, straight down, and it starts to angle out once you hit about a mile an hour. Once you've got the right amount of weight so that it's dropping straight down and only starting to swing out once you're getting above a mile an hour, then that becomes your speed control marker, right? You just leave that suspended rod, the weight straight down, and you just watch that line. And as long as that line is straight down, you're within the speed range that you want to stay in. And then if the wind picks up, and even though you think you're paddling at the right speed, you see that line is starting to lift up and drift away from you, you know that you're moving too fast. So if you don't have sonar that's got GPS, when you get out on the water and you set up your first drift pattern, just spend a little time with your phone and adding weight on a line that's straight down until it stays straight down as long as you're in the optimum range, and starts to swing out away once you get too much speed. And then put your phone away. You can just use that And that would be a helpful way to make sure that you're staying within the speed range that you want to over the course of the day. So a helpful little trick there for people who maybe don't have sonar with GPS, you can still make drifting work, and you can still be, effective at it even without the sonar. It just takes a little more work up front, but it's definitely worth it. So when it comes to drift and bait for catfish, the optimum speed is typically going to be between a half a mile an hour and 1 mile an hour, at least on a lake or reservoir situation. There may be times where that's too fast, and you really do have to park on spots and soak your bait for periods of time. But for the purpose of drifting, a half mile an hour ballpark is typically where you want to start at. A half a mile an hour to a mile an hour, it keeps your bait moving, getting it in front of more fish and hopefully more active fish. But it's slow enough that it's leaving a scent trail that fish can follow. It doesn't get within range and then get out of range so quickly that a fish that was interested didn't have time to track it down. So, that's why it can seem painfully slow sometimes, but it is covering ground, especially compared to sitting still, and it's giving those fish time to track your bait and try and eat it. Being in a kayak requires a little more active approach to maintaining your speed than just being in a boat. You can get in a boat and you might be able to just set your trolling motor and you're good. Most of us in the kayak, we don't have that luxury. We're either paddling or pedaling, so we have to actively be paying attention to our speed and very frequently adjusting for it. The wind can affect us a lot more than it can affect a larger, a full-size boat. So we just have to be paying attention to it all the time. I mean, it's always going to go one of three ways, right? The breeze is going to be perfect, and it's going to drift you along at exactly the speed you want to go, which doesn't happen all the time, but it does happen, and that's pretty sweet when it happens. Or you're not going to have any breeze, and you're going to have to paddle a bit, so you're really trolling. Which frequently happens, is that there's too much wind, and then you're going too fast just by trying to let the wind push you, And so, in order to slow yourself down, I mean, speeding up's easy. You can paddle or pedal, but if you have to slow down, you pretty much have two methods of doing it. You're either going to need something like a dragging chain to slow your speed down if the wind's not pushing you too much over your desired speed, or you're going to have a drift sock. So those become two important pieces of equipment, pieces of gear that you're going to have at the ready if you're going to be successful drift fishing. Because if you get out on the water and the wind picks up and now you can't get under 1.5 miles or 2 miles an hour, you're probably not going to be as successful as you would be if you could slow yourself down. And trying to paddle against the wind to slow your speed down is a lot more work. It's one thing to paddle against the wind to get up to speed, but when the wind is blowing so hard that you're just trying to slow yourself down, it gets kind of sloppy, So a dragging chain, that's just a section of chain, and a lot of people will take it and cover it with some rubber tubing, like a bicycle inner tube, and then duct tape it, wrap it so that it doesn't have any real edges. It will slide through. It won't hang up hardly at all. If you're putting the rubber coating around it in some way, then you're going to dampen it so it doesn't clang around as much. You might think that something like that is going to spook the fish, but oddly enough, a lot of times, it sort of kicks up some mud and a little disturbance, and that can actually attract fish, which seems sort of counterintuitive, but it does happen. So a dragging chain is simple, right? Just a section of chain. The other option, like I said, is going to be a drift sock, and you can either buy a drift sock or you can make your own. I have sort of two versions. I have a big drift sock, which is one that I paid for, and they're stupid expensive. and that is for when it is really windy. When there is a strong, consistent wind, it's not just gusts, but like there's just a strong wind. A lot of times the only way you can get that speed down is with a full-size drift sock. More often than not, you're just dealing with breezy weather that's got some gusts, and it's just pushing you on its own just a little bit too fast. And in that case, just a smaller do-it-yourself drift sock that you can make out of, a lot of different ways will usually work. My small do-it-yourself drift socks are really cheap and really easy. I'm going to do a video on those, so if that video is done, there will be a card. If not, and you're interested in that, just be sure to subscribe, and so you get updates, and then when that video comes out, you'll know. As far as using the drift sock, you're gonna clip it off to where you normally clip your anchor line, and let the wind push you and keep it close enough to your kayak that it's not getting in the way of your lines that are out that you're dragging or suspending, and use your anchor trolley to position it in a way that keeps you facing the direction you want to go. It's pretty straightforward, really. As far as gear, that's really the important gear that you're going to need when it comes to speed control. Is you're going to need something to slow your drift down when nature's not cooperating. So just be mindful of that. Look into your options, and make sure you're ready if you get out on the water and that wind picks up. That's it as far as speed control. Make sure you have what you need so that you can keep your speed right between a half mile an hour and a mile an hour. And if you combine that with the other topics, how you're presenting your bait and where you're presenting your bait, all these things taken together in the context of the overall strategy, you will absolutely have more success on the water and more catfish or other fish, for that matter, in the boat at the end of the day, and just a better time overall. So I hope you found this whole series of videos helpful. If you have more questions or you want me to hone in on some other areas about it, post that down in the comments, and so I can see, so I can know what you'd like. Also, if you just like this form, if you like this way of like putting the different videos together in a playlist so you can binge watch or pick and choose, let me know. Otherwise, that wraps up the series here as far as the fundamentals of drift fishing. Hopefully this will help get you more enjoyment, more satisfaction on the water. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. Until next time, paddle up. Let's go looking for a fight.